Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cotlar, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
Good morning, everybody. And a good morning to everyone that is tuning in from all over the world. If you are doing that, I would love you to let us know that you are listening. I know Debbie is listening. Please feel free to ask questions via the chat box. Today's class is called From Faith to Flavor. We're 2.5 weeks away from Pesach, so today's class will be dedicated towards Passover. They tell the story that Moses is up on Mount Sinai, and God is giving him the text of the Torah, and he says, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. So Moses says, oh, thank you, God. I assume from that you mean that we should have separate dishes for meat and milk. And God says, no, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Oh, thank you. I guess that means we shouldn't eat milk and meat at the same time. No, I said, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Oh, so that means we need to wait 6 hours after we have meat until milk. So God says, all right, have it your way.
I love it.
So many people sometimes laugh or mock or do not believe in some of the rabbinic traditions. I'll often meet people who will say that when it comes to the written Torah, the scriptures, that is what I have my belief in, but some of the oral tradition, even if they were inspired, at the end of the day, people are fallible, and we can change that, we can alter that. And what I find fascinating is, if you were to strip the oral tradition away from Jewish observance, we wouldn't be left with a lot of the things that people take for granted. So Passover is coming up, right? Which parts of the Passover seder are biblical?
The telling.
Okay, telling of the story, correct.
Going to Jerusalem.
Well, yeah, if you went, but that's not what we do today. Right. What part of the story that we do today, an average Passover seder, and I love seder as an example because that is something that everyone does. I love, there's something very beautiful about Pesach that all Jews, or a large percentage of Jews, regardless of level of observance, they do Pesach. I would perhaps argue, and I don't know, what do you think? Pesach versus Yom Kippur? More Jews.
Pesach.
Yeah. Which is incredible, and I actually love it. The phone is ringing, and people ask, Rabbi, where can I pick up my, this item or that item? All of a sudden, it fills my heart with such glee that time of year when people come out of the woodwork. In any event, everyone does it, and yet so many of the traditions are actually not in the Bible. So 4 cups of wine, is that in the Bible?
Nope. No. But a bit of matzah.
Okay, so telling over the story is, what else?
Bit of matzah.
Matzah.
The season.
The fact that it needs to be in the spring, so the actual date of the holiday, yes, absolutely. So, telling over the story, not eating chametz, and eating matzah.
Oh, and the Paschal lamb.
Well, yeah, but that we don't have today either. You have a little tradition. Okay, we got a shaved one as a reminder of something that was once biblical. But so many of the other things are not. So, that's it, that is biblical. All right? The matzah, telling over the story, not eating chametz. Today.
Matzah both ways.
But the positive and the negative. Yeah. Rabbinic, we have 4 cups of wine. We'll get there in a moment. 4 cups of wine, that's a rabbinic invention. And then we have a rabbinic thing that's almost biblical, maror, except that it says in the scriptures to eat maror with the Paschal offering. So it's sort of tied to it. So some say it only is biblical if you have the Passover offering, but today it's more rabbinic. That's different than matzah, which is a standalone mitzvah. So maror, 4 cups of wine, those would be examples of things that are rabbinic. Oh, one more. Praising God, called Hallel. That would be rabbinic. And then we have zillions of customs, such as
4 cups of wine.
Well, that would be rabbinic. That would be even, when I say customs, I mean
Oh.
later than even Talmudic.
The Elijah's book.
Elijah's cup, that would definitely be customs. The leaning is, the reclining is not, is later on.
And
It is mentioned in the Talmud, but it is post the, in fact, that question of the 4 questions was added later on when they took out the question about what? Anyone guess? The 4 questions went through a change. One of the 4 questions was about the Paschal offering. Yeah. Yeah, that one was taken out. Now we have the leaning one. Yeah.
really?
Well, on all other nights, we don't, we have lamb that's, it has to be roasted a certain way. We don't ask that question today. Okay. So by way of introduction, so many of the things that we do on Pesach is not biblical. And the truth is, so many of the holidays, how many Jews come to Kol Nidre? Oh, Kol Nidre, I would never miss Kol Nidre. Where in scriptures does it mention Kol Nidre? It says on Yom Kippur you should fast. So it's fascinating how so many of the things that we take for granted are rabbinic. And what we will do today is take a look at 2 mitzvot, one biblical, one rabbinic, and see how their details are actually reflective on the difference between biblical and mitzvot, biblical and rabbinic mitzvot in general. And we will be analyzing matzah versus the wine. Okay. So
About the apples and honey.
So apples and honey would be a great example of something so many Jews do on Rosh Hashanah, and yet it is a tradition. I don't even think it's in the Talmud. It would be a custom.
That'd be like having your challah be round, not braided.
Correct.
Again,
Correct.
we're talking about Rosh Hashanah, but custom.
Correct. That's all custom, and I'm not dismissing customs are beautiful.
Yeah.
However, sometimes people will focus so much on the matzo ball soup of Passover and not eat matzah, or and it's wait a minute, what is the biblical mitzvah? You got to tell over the story. You don't have to read every page of the Haggadah. You don't, but you need to tell over the story in a way that's meaningful and relevant. That's part of the mitzvah. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Jersey, page 262. Here's where the Torah commands us to eat matzah.
In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, in the evening, you shall eat unleavened cakes until the 21st day of the month in the evening.
So the 14th in the evening, the reason why it words it that way, because 14th in the evening is the same thing as saying the 15th. Because the Jewish day begins at night. But since in biblical times, what happened on the 14th day? They brought their lamb. We don't do that today. That whole day was a major barbecue going on in Jerusalem. But the 14th was a big day, so then it says, in the evening of that day, you begin eating matzah, and then that continues for the 7 biblical days of Pesach. Yeah.
So I was just gonna, like a little side note. So when everyone brought their Paschal lamb
Yeah.
from Jerusalem back in those days, so everyone kind of set up their own camp and made their own offering. Is that kind of like a big tailgate of sorts?
Yeah, because it says that if your family was large enough to finish one lamb, you did it yourself. But otherwise, most people can't eat a whole lamb, the family, and you would do it together with multiple families.
Gotcha.
Because one of the rules was you weren't supposed to have any leftovers.
Yeah.
So you would make your calculations beforehand, what size lamb you're going to get. People would do the slaughtering in the temple courtyard. I can't imagine the numbers. We have historical records of it, by the way. Josephus, who he lived right before the destruction of the Second Temple, okay? We don't take all his words like they're biblical. He's just a secular historian, but it still gives us some, idea of what might have happened. He describes the mayhem and what it was like and just thousands of lambs. So they would bring the lambs and they were slaughtered in the actual temple courtyard, but then they would actually do the act barbecuing and eating anywhere in Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem, okay.
And it was a huge economic boost for Jerusalem because Jews came from everywhere for it. So it's interesting. So that was...
So this says a specific date, and I thought you said springtime.
Elsewhere in the Torah, it says, make sure that Passover is in the springtime. So the date is the 15th day of Nisan. We have a separate command to ensure that the 15th day of Nisan falls out in springtime, which is why this year we had a leap year, to make sure that would happen. Okay. So the Torah commands us to eat matzah. However, the Torah doesn't give us amounts of matzah to have at the seder table. And we know this nice Jewish tradition. You walk into a traditional or I think really any seder. How many matzahs do you have? Three. Where does that come from? 3 matzahs. Why 3? So everyone, of course, I have to have 3 matzahs, right?
Yeah, you gotta break the middle one.
So the question is, why 3 matzahs? We'll begin with we're going to do a halachic legal explanation, and most of the class is going to be the spiritual mystical one. The halachic legal one is very simple. Every Shabbat, how many breads do we traditionally have at a Shabbat table? 2. Okay? If you go to a traditional Shabbat table, you will see 2 loaves of bread. The reason for that is?
Because we got a double portion.
Double portion of manna in the desert. Every day they would get 1 amount of manna. On Friday they would get double. So we have 2 loaves Friday night. The question is, why Shabbat day do we used to have 2? You would think that by the time Shabbat day came around, you'd only have 1 left. I think some Sephardic may do 1 on Shabbat day, I believe. But Friday night, definitely 2 loaves. So the tradition was always at 2 loaves and 2 complete loaves. So that gives us a problem. What's the problem? The problem is,
How is this day different?
let's do, text 2b. Let's go to 2b, Brian.
Although one must partake of the 2 complete loaves of bread every festival meal, on the night of Passover, however, some say that 1.5 pieces of matzah is sufficient. These authorities believe that when the sages interpreted the scriptural term for matzah, poor man's bread, to mean that the matzah is to be broken, as a pauper is accustomed to, they meant to decrease from the lechem mishnah.
Lechem mishnah means double.
Okay.
Double, yeah.
So that one of the 2 requisite pieces is to be non-whole. There are others who say that the sages meant to add on to the lechem mishnah, so that aside from the 2 pieces of matzah one is obligated to partake of on any festival, there must be an additional incomplete piece for the poor man's bread. This is the widespread custom, and one should only deviate from it in times of need.
So let's explain that. One of the matzahs are going to be broken. At what point in the seder is the matzah broken? Prior to when we make the hamotzi?
No.
Or after we make the hamotzi?
Before, no?
We do it pretty early on in the seder. We break the middle matzah before we do the whole telling of the story.
Is that the one where we take,
Yeah.
we take half of it and go
Yeah,
buy
yeah.
it for the afternoon?
No, well, you find it much later on, but you break it early in the going.
You hide the afikomen.
And why do you break it? Because it's called poor man's bread. And if a poor person was eating a piece of bread, they would never have the luxury, first of all, having a whole piece. And if they did, they sure wouldn't eat it all at one time because there's no guarantee they'll have.
Tomorrow.
So they'll eat a little bit, put some aside. So that is the meaning of saying the Haggadah over a broken piece of matzah. So now we have a question. 1 piece has to be broken. So are we going to make the hamotzi on less than 2 complete loaves? So here's where there's the debate. Some say, yeah, you can do it on 1.5. Others say, no, you still need your 2 complete loaves. So you're actually making the hamotzi on 2.5. Is that making sense? So,
Yeah.
so you start off with how many complete ones before the seder begins?
3.
So you start off with 3. One of them is going to get broken in order that when you make the hamotzi blessing, you are left with 2 complete ones. That's a very technical answer to the question. Now, who had a question on that?
Well, a couple things. So first, the 2 complete loaves are representative of the 2 loaves, 2 manna we would get for Shabbat. And then we're going to break one, and we don't want to break one of those 2.
Correct, because we want to make the hamotzi.
It's the prevailing.
Correct.
It's the prevailing.
This is, very
now
legal.
at my table, we actually have a big old stack because and
Correct.
we use it for everyone to eat from also. Is that also fine? So you have at least 3?
Absolutely, but you traditionally, at least head of the household or someone who has their own seder plate, I don't know if everyone has a seder plate or a few people have seder plates. The person who has the seder plate, they will typically have 3. And then, and we'll do this at our house, I'll have 3, and then around the table, we'll put loads and loads of matzah for everyone else. The other difference is when I open my matzah, I get the shmurah matzah. So you're hoping 60, 70%. The question is, what percentage come intact when they get here?
Oh, wow.
So I actually found out that the ones that I typically give out to people, at least in the past, are made to be able to stay whole. As a result, they are inferior, they are thicker, and they're not as good.
Right.
Because they are made specifically that people should have 3 shmurah matzahs at the seder. So I complained actually to my distributor, and I said I've compared that with the ones that I serve at my seder, because I get these 3 in the pack, and you probably got them from me in previous years, and I say they're not nearly as good. They're like, yeah, they're made to guarantee to survive
Shipping, yeah.
And I said, I don't want that, because if they don't taste good, no one's going to eat it. So I said, so this year I actually I packed my own little 3 sets from the ones that I did. It's not, where there's about 50-60% are whole, and the other 40 are not.
Right.
They're much thinner and much crispier. So they'll tell me after
And they're delicious.
Passover. What? You'll tell me after Passover, how did I get into this? Oh, so when I open it up, the ones that are complete will be the ones I'll make sure to use for the big 3. And the other ones I'll put in the middle of the table for everyone to eat their own matzah. But at least the 3 that you do the hamotzi on should be complete. Questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so we always buy them, they're always broken. I get the big box at ShopRite in New York.
Yeah.
So this year we didn't go shopping in New York, we went to Baltimore.
Yeah.
And they have shmurah matzah that's square, not
Correct.
round. I never saw shmurah matzah.
So that's for another discussion. That's called machine-made shmurah matzah.
Is that okay or not?
It is. Chabad prefers the handmade, and I'll tell you why afterwards. But it's okay.
If you read the story of Manischewitz,
There we go.
There's a lot of it.
We had a
The
class
whole process
on
is
this actually.
fascinating.
Yeah. And it had to do with the
I think you
fact
can find
that
a story
machines, when you make a circle, at least in the old days, there was always the leftovers after every batch.
Yeah.
So what do they? Then they use the leftovers for the next one, and that's not good with matzah. Why?
Oh,
Because it had more than 18
It
minutes.
had more than 18 minutes and it leavened. So that's why the machine-made matzahs ended up always being square. But let's for another time. Interesting. Now, so we have 3 matzahs, and we have a legal reason why we have 3 matzahs. We know, however, when it comes to the wine, which is purely rabbinic, not biblical, the number isn't 3. It's the big number of the evening, which is 4. Steve, text 3.
Each and every one, both men and women, must drink 4 cups of wine on this night. The number should not be reduced. Even a poor person who is sustained by charity should not have fewer than 4 cups. The size of each of these cups should be a quarter
Of a lug. It's a couple ounces. They don't have to be huge goblets. 4 ounces, cups are fine.
It's not for them.
Yeah, it's not for, and it's your choice whether you want to go for the like
up
4
for
or 5%
interpretation,
or the 13%. And obviously, if someone has difficulties with alcohol, then grape juice can be used. Certainly, for someone, God forbid, that suffered with an addiction, grape juice must be used. But if it makes no difference to you, it is still preferable to have wine because it's supposed to be, as I say in Yiddish, chashuv. It's supposed to be special, elegant type of thing. So usually don't go somewhere and have a cup of grape juice. But again, if you need to have the grape juice, by all means have the grape juice. I know many people that mix wine and grape juice. That way you have a lighter wine. Or you can just get one of those 3-4% thingies that taste almost like grape juice to begin with. Okay, so 4 cups of wine. Why 4 cups of wine? We had 3 matzahs. Why 4 cups of wine? And anyone know offhand? It's a good review here. Good
To
review.
remind yourself to ask 4 questions.
No, this predated, I believe, the 4 questions and the 4 kids. All right. Text 4, Jerusalem Talmud. And
What is the origin of the 4 cups? Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Ben Yah that they correspond to the 4 redemptions. Therefore, say to the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will extract you from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will save you from their labor, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments, and I will take you to me as a people, and I will extract you, and I will save you, and I will redeem you, and I will take you.
so these are 4 expressions of Geulah. Very important, this text. And much ink has been spilled talking about the meaning of each one of these 4. The Bible is not just poetic. It's not just saying the same thing in 4 different ways. Some will say one is the slavery from the labor, one is the slavery from geographic Egypt, one is the, what did I say, slavery? One is the redemption from the labor, one is the redemption from the geographic Egypt, one is making the Jews their own people, and then one would be Torah, spirituality, Other people explain it differently, but there are 4 expressions, hence 4 cups of wine. Yes?
What's the difference in saving and redeeming?
Mm-hmm.
What is it? I thought save is redeeming.
Vehotzetzi. The first one is, well, how did it extract you? First one is take out. Hotzeti, yatsa, yetziat mitzrayim. Next one, hitzalti, hatzalah. Hatzalah means save. If anyone was ever in the New York area, the Jewish ambulance service, they have like a special Jewish one, it's called hatzalah. Hatzalah means to save. So anytime you save someone from anything, the word would be hatzalah. The next one, redeemed, is different than just hatzalah. We can speculate. I don't have. What do you think the difference is?
Forgive is redeemed.
Redeemed is taking someone out of a situation.
What's the Hebrew word?
Geula,
Geula.
like redemption.
It's a term what was bad into good.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there's a transformation that happens. That's good. When you redeem, there's a transformation. And finally, vilakachti. Lakach means to take. All right, so we have simple answers. The simple answer is why 3 matzahs? We got to have 2, but then we need to have 3 because of the broken one. And why 4 cups of wine? 4 expressions of redemption. Yes.
But what I'm confused about that is there was at time a debate: 4 cups of wine or 5 cups of wine. Hence the Elijah's cup compromise.
Correct.
So what was the 5th cup of wine?
The verse continues. The next words are in a new verse, and they say, "I will bring you to the land of Israel. I will bring you veheveti." And that is why there was a debate whether you should have 4 or 5. But it was both people learned it out from the same verses,
right.
but it's in a new verse. It says, da 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 da, period, and I will bring you to the land of milk and honey.
Wait.
So, yeah,
There were no periods. How are we sure it's a new verse?
oral tradition.
Okay.
But how do we know any of this? Oral tradition. Okay, good question.
When you look at the definition of redeem, it makes total sense. Redeem can mean both compensate for the faults or bad aspects of something. So God was compensating for how we did behave.
Good.
And the other meaning is gain or regain possession of something in exchange for payment. Our payment was the worshiping of. So redeem does make sense as a word different than save.
Good question. Okay, thanks for bringing that up. Good. Here's the problem. That's all nice, and most kids in school would stop here. And from a legal perspective, we could stop here. But I could ask the same question. If it's important to do something in the number of 4 to remind us of the 4 expressions of redemption, then why not do 4 what? Matzahs. Unless you tell me that matzah has nothing to do with redemption, well, text 5. Janice, please read for us. We're going to say at the seder, when we pick up the matzah, there's that part where we say Pesach, matzah, and maror, and we say what each one means. And what do we say?
This matzah that we eat, for what reason? Because the dough of our fathers did not have time to become leavened before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, revealed Himself to them and redeemed them. Thus it is said, they baked matzah cakes from the dough that they had brought out of Egypt, because it was not leavened, for they had been driven out of Egypt and could not delay, and they had also not prepared any other provision.
So if matzah is the food of redemption, would it not make more sense to have 4 matzahs corresponding to the 4 expressions of Geula? And lest you say, Rabbi, what difference is it? These are big deals. Jews around the world, millions of them, will be observing these traditions, and there is a nuanced reason for why there's 3 and 4. But there's not going to be a halachic, a legal answer for this. We're going to have to go very Kabbalistic and spiritual. So we're going to have to turn on our spiritual caps right now. But anyone want to give a practical answer before we go further?
The Constitution can't take 4 pieces of matzah?
I'm sure they could have made a matzah cover. Typically, when you buy these matzah things, they have these cloths with little dividers in between. So you could have done that with 4.
Does that mean the bread was baked before they left the desert? Because otherwise it seems like it would.
No, they said they had not prepared food.
Correct.
Was it cooked?
They say the sun, right? The sun might have.
Well, it clearly took,
baked by the sun.
however they made the real matzah, it clearly took more than 18 minutes.
It did. The first year did. Yeah, we're not.
Yeah.
But At the same time, the Jews were told for the future,
Right, of course.
eat matzah. Yeah.
It's symbolic.
The other interesting piece, and we've done this before, I don't want anyone to be confused, that's why I'm mentioning it. In this context, we say, why do we eat matzah? Because it's the food of redemption, we left, and God did it. How do we start off this class? It's poor man's bread. Oh. So matzah has two dimensions to it. Yeah, it is. It's very simple, flat. So matzah has two dimensions to it. So if someone says, is it poor man's bread or is it bread of redemption? The answer is both. And guess what? There was two matzahs that the Jews ate in Egypt. One is the accidental matzah that they wanted to bake bread and it didn't have enough time to rise. But guess when else they had matzah? The night beforehand. While they were still in Egypt and eating their lamb for the first time, God told them to have matzah that night too. So there was a matzah they ate in Egypt, and there was a matzah they ate on the way out of Egypt.
Did God prescribe how that matzah the first night should have been prepared?
I don't know. I know that for future times that was part of the oral tradition. I don't know if that was part of that first year. That's a good question.
Otherwise, it would have just been bread.
Well, he says matzah. So, but I don't know if there was, the details that we have today. Okay, but here's our question. Why 3 matzahs, 4 cups of wine? Is that clear? The question is clear? Okay. We're going to have to go mystical here, everybody. So we got 15 minutes now. Numbers are a big deal in Judaism. They aren't random. There's meaning to each. It's more than just, who was it that said 1 is the loneliest number you'll ever see?
3 Dog Night.
Who?
3 Dog Night.
Okay. But we know 1 is very important in Judaism. The numbers are more than just the number. There's a lot of meaning to it. And we also know that based upon the idea of gematria, numerical values, that the number has a meaning. So Aleph is 1, and Bet is 2, and Gimel is 3, and Dalet is 4, so on and so forth. And there's a lot in Jewish tradition and Kabbalah that when different numbers share numerical values, there's a correlation between them. Okay. So, what was that? Oh, you've discussed that before.
Yeah. No, the meditation class knows nothing about this.
Okay, they know nothing
No,
about
we
that.
haven't got to the numbers.
Okay, so not only is numbers important, and not only do numbers correspond to letters of the alphabet, but it actually goes one step further. The letters of the alphabet, their shape is significant. For instance, I think I have explained to you before, and whoever has been to many classes here, I've probably heard this from you before, that the word for truth in Hebrew, emet, there's a reason for that. Aleph is the first letter of the alphabet, and Tuf is the end, and Mem is the middle. So something that is true is lasting throughout. You've heard that from me before. Maybe not.
Right.
In addition, Aleph has 2 legs. I don't have I wish I had an alphabet chart here.
Well, we all have Hebrew in the pages.
Okay, an Aleph has 2 legs. A Bet has 2, Emet. A Mem has 2 legs, and a Tuf has 2 legs. Each one of those letters stands on both legs. The word for a lie in Hebrew is sheker. The shin, at least in the way it is in the Torah scroll, is like a V. It stands on one leg. The kuf has 1 leg, and the resh has 1 leg. Because when someone tells a lie, we know what always happens. You got to follow that one up with another line, because you're not standing on stable ground. We all know that. So there's meaning to the letters in the alphabet. So there is a place in the Talmud, text 7. Here goes.
The rabbis told Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, children have come to the study hall and said things the likes of which were not said even in the days of Joshua the son of Nun.
So a bunch of kids were talking and they said such prophetic ideas. What did they say?
Thus, alphabet means learn wisdom, alphabet. Gimel Dalet means show kindness to the poor. Gimel Dalet, why is the foot of the Gimel stretched toward the Dalet? Because the benevolent run after, seek out the poor. And why is the leg of the Dalet stretched out toward the Gimel? Because the poor must make himself available to him.
So we're not going to analyze Aleph Bet today. We're going to analyze Gimel Dalet. Gimel is the 3rd letter, Dalet is the 4th letter. Gimel makes a G sound, Dalet makes a D sound. Okay? The gimel, what does the word gimel mean? We say in the Amidah, gomel chasadim tovim. Gomel, it means to give. Acts of kindness are called what? Torah rests on three things: Torah, Avoda, and Gemilat Chasadim. Gimel means to give. Yeah, is familiar? Gimel means to give, to transmit. Adal in Hebrew means to receive or someone that is poor. So Gomel, Gimel, Daled means to give to the receiver, to give to the poor. And then it says, if you look at these little letters, imagine the Mr. Gimel running after the Dalet. See how his legs sort of jumping, running ahead? The Dalet is sort of faced the other way because he doesn't want to receive. He's ashamed, he's embarrassed. So the Gimel is running after, the Gimel is giving to the Dalet. In sequence, Gomel, Dalet means giving and receiving. Okay. Let's take this idea one step further between giving and receiving. We're not talking so much here about giving, let's say, money. We're going to use the metaphor of transmitting an idea. And in Kabbalah, it says, if you want to explain something to someone, and you're a good teacher, a good professor, good parent, you don't just immediately say whatever's on your mind. There are stages in that transmission. The teacher thinks, okay, let me try to get rid of all the stuff I know about this idea. What is the one point that I want to give over? Sometimes people don't do that. And as a result, the class or the idea is what they call all over the place. They didn't do that idea at the beginning. What is the one thing I want people to walk away with? That would be called the aleph of something, the point.
Goodness.
Whatever the class is, there's that idea. Yeah, goodness, certainly, absolutely. What is in Hebrew we call it the Nikudah, the center point. Okay. The next thing you do is you don't just explain one idea. You then take that idea and you embellish it. You give stories. You give examples. Okay. So you take from that one and you make it bigger. Then what do? You actually transmit it. These are the three steps. And then what has to happen? Whatever happens on the other end, the receiving end. The receiving end. And the receiving end is significant as well because the receiving end needs to absorb the idea and unpack it. A lot of times that doesn't happen. You know, it's sort of when you download a file, so you will download for all the techies around here, the one file, and then you double click it and it installs it, and then it unpacks it, it unzips it. But you just downloaded that one single file, then you got to make it absorbed inside of you. So 1 is the teacher making it small. 2 is the teacher expanding it. 3 is the teacher transmitting it. 4 would be the person receiving it. If I take a picture and I want to send it to you on the phone, so first I have to capture the image. Then my phone is probably going to split that up into A's and B's in the binary file or something like that. Right?
Zeros and ones.
Zeros and ones. Oh, sorry. Not A's and B's. Zeros and ones. Then go to transmit it. And then the receiver has to absorb it, get it, download it, whatever the case is. So in the words of Jewish mysticism, text 8. Where are we up to in the reading?
The well-known analogy for this is the transmission of a concept or a thought from a great master to a humble student. The teacher is so immeasurably greater than his student that the student is unable to receive the concept as it exists in the broad mind of the teacher. Therefore, the teacher must contract the idea to one point that is theoretically accessible to the student recipient, an abstract of everything that will be transmitted to the recipient. Since this point is still, in general terms, it is still beyond the comprehension of the recipient. Rather, the details of the abstract point must be explicated so that they come within the recipient's grasp. However, all of this takes place with the giver-teacher who plans out in his mind the details of this concept, like one who imagines in his mind how to bring an idea into speech or into writing. After that is the transmission to the recipient, when the concept is delivered tersely without all the detail imagined by the teacher. And after that is the elucidation and the development of ideas within the recipient.
That's interesting, that the teacher doesn't dumb down the message. The teacher gives something that when it's eventually processed, the student will get all that info, but they got to do it for themselves. Because if the teacher gives all the info at the beginning, it'll be too much for the student to get. Rather, you give general ideas that the student on their own at some point in time, whether today or 5 years from now, or like the person says, now I understand what mom once taught me, right? Will one day get to it. Now, interestingly enough, in this Hasidic discourse, it then connects these four to what, Hal?
The four to the matriarch.
Well, before that even, the four letters of God's name, the Yud, the Hey, and the Vav. These four stages are connected to the creation process. We're not going to do that today. What we are going to say here is 3 has to do, where is the, so there's 4 in all, but where is the separation between receiver and giver? After 3, right? There was 1, 2, and 3. And then there is what happens on the part of the other person, which is 4. So this would be the meaning for why Gimel represents what? 3 represents giving, and 4 represents receiving. Now in Kabbalah it goes a step further, and it says that 3, giving and receiving, also have to do, I want to make sure this is clear, with masculine and feminine energy. Now, it doesn't mean that every man is there are men that could be far more with the feminine energy. There could be women that have more of the masculine energy. But a man, the masculine energy is directing, it is commanding, it is instructing. The feminine energy is what? Development. It's instead of telling the child what to do, it's nurturing something in the child so they get it. Instead of directing, it's more about what goes on in the receiving end. And certainly with the formation of a baby as well, you have, well, let's do it in the text that we're going to do here. Yes?
Gimel Dalet, is that a word in itself or not?
Gimel is a word and Dal is a word, not Dalet. Dal is a word.
What is Gimel?
Does Gimel Dalet make a word?
Yeah. That's my question.
Together? No, it does not.
Okay.
It does not. So
Thank you.
anyone that knows every number, 1 is God, and 2 are the tablets. We're going to say this actually at the end of the Haggadah. What is 3 in Judaism? 3 are the patriarchs, and 4 are the matriarchs, and 5 are the books of the Bible, and so on and so forth. Why is it that 3 are the patriarchs and 4 are the matriarchs? It's kind of odd. Why are there 4 matriarchs? Why not 3? Now, the simple answer is because
Laban was a cheat.
correct. There's a very easy answer for that, that there was a biblical character who cheated Jacob of the wife that he was supposed to have, and he ended up marrying her sister, and then he felt bad, so he married both women, and there's a lot of problems that happened as a result of that. That is the simple story. Mystically, we're going to say no. 3 is a masculine number, and 4 is a feminine number. Because of time, I want to just paraphrase what it says in text 270. And the difference in the contribution is that the man gives something that is in a concealed, all together, that has potential, but there's nothing there yet. It is only when it is transmitted and nurtured and actualized in the receiver that the baby is born. And that is the role of the woman. And that is why that is 4. So everyone get this? 3 giving, 4 receiving. Okay. What does this have to do with Passover? Often I'll hear people say, when the Jews left Egypt, we didn't really leave Egypt. We didn't. God schlepped us out of Egypt. All right, I'll say that again. We didn't leave Egypt. God schlepped us out of Egypt. What do I mean by that? The Jews at the time of the Exodus story were not on a very good spiritual level. Just imagine, how long did they live in Egypt for? 210 years. Now, I mean, we can imagine the level of assimilation that would happen. And we know what happens in America, but this was prior to the giving of the Torah, so they didn't really have a constitution to hold them together. All they had is some vague family traditions and values. That's all they had. They were exposed to Egyptian culture for 210 years, and they were slaves, so they were very much always being,
and we're talking
hard-working slave. I didn't think they had much time for education.
The pyramids didn't build themselves in a day.
Right. They had not much time for education. It's sad. We don't mention this often, but their beliefs were, in many ways, similar to the Egyptians. They picked up all the Egyptian gods and all that kind of stuff.
They wanted to go back to Egypt.
Yeah.
I mean, after Sinai, we want to go back to Egypt several times.
And we don't realize, we always blame the Jews. No, they were a slave people. That's who they were. That's who they were until God schlepped them out. And Kabbalah says, had God not schlepped them out in such a miraculous, crazy, amazing way, we wouldn't have been able to do it. It would have been so deeply inside of us that there would have been no way to get us out. And let us now do text 11.
Yes, ma'am. However, it appears to me that this may be understood from the sage's statement. This matzah that we eat, for what reason? Because our fathers did not have time to become leavened before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, revealed Himself to them and redeemed them immediately, as is stated, and they baked dough. But what is this redemption that He redeemed through the baking of dough? Rather, the intent here is that the Jewish people resided in Egypt for a considerable amount of time until they intermingled amongst the Egyptians and learned from their behavior. But God, in the merit of the forefathers and on account of His kindness, gave them a few mitzvot, the paschal sacrifice, matzah, and manna.
And maror.
Maror.
That was their only mitzvah. They had to do something to identify as Jews, to stand out. Yeah.
So that they would help them come out of Egypt when the time came, especially the matzah, which symbolizes freedom. And if God had not redeemed them at the time with His mitzvah and His kindness to break the powers of impurity and the evil inclination, the Satan, who wished to cause their internal figurative dough to leaven, for just as only a hair's breadth separates hametz from matzah, if the Jewish people had remained in Egypt just a moment, so that their internal figurative dough would have turned to hametz, i.e. they would have sank farther into Egyptian depravity, they would be imprisoned and trapped in Egypt forever. They would have never been redeemed.
So they were almost at a point of no return. They were schlepped so deeply, sunk. That's why mystically it talks about them being absorbed in the 49th level of impurity, thus requiring afterwards, what? 49 days to get out of that on their own. Okay? So let's go back to 3 and 4 again. Let's go back to those 3 expressions in the 4th expression. The first one was, I will take you out. The second one was, I will save you. The third one was, I will redeem you. The fourth one, I will take you to me as a people. There's a big change that happens between the first 3 and the fourth one. The fourth one is when we become God's people. The fourth one didn't happen when we left Egypt.
It happens at Sinai.
Correct.
It was
After
49 days.
49 days later. The first 3 God did to us. The fourth we had to do on our own. So matzah represents this poor man's bread where we're just flour and water and we're crushed. And we say, God, the first step in getting free is I'm willing to let go. I'm willing to go on this ride with you. That's what they needed. The humility to go on the ride with God and be taken out. Once they did that, now let me appreciate my relationship with God. Let me enjoy it. Let me treasure it. That is wine. Matzah is dry. Matzah is tasteless. Matzah is flat. Matzah is not enjoyable. Wine is geschmack. It's enjoyable. It's pleasurable. The first stage in the relationship with God was the 3, and the 3 now we understand relates to matzah. It's what God did to us. The 4, or the 4 cups of wine, And that's when we on our own then developed this relationship and it became a real part of us. And in a sense, we go through these stages every single year. The journey from Passover to Shavuot. Passover is, I'm willing to let go. I'm willing to be taken. I have the simple, simplistic faith, even though it's boring. And then I want to make it real and I want to develop it, and that is the wine. So that is the 3, and that is the 4. And let me just finish the last note. Mother and father, what do you think the written Torah is compared to? Or what do you think the oral Torah is compared to?
Well, the Torah would be the father, and then the oral would be the mother.
Thus says the Lord, you should do this, don't do that. That was the Torah that was given to us. The oral tradition is what we developed, what we made part of ourselves and made our own traditions and contributed. So it makes sense that the mitzvah that came as part of tradition is 4. The mitzvah that is commanded to us in the Bible is 3. A few other texts at the end that highlight this idea, but I think we'll hold it here because of time. So a little deeper meaning to it. Yes?
So I had a question on this last text we read.
Sure.
We talk about the mitzvot that God gave to the Egyptian Jews. That was just the day before. That wasn't years before. It was one time do these things and then tomorrow we go.
It was on the 2 weeks before they left. God told Moses to tell the Jews about it. On the 10th day of the month, they took the lamb. On the 14th day of the month, they ate the lamb. On the 15th day, they left. So the last 2 weeks was when all of this happened. The last 2 weeks. It was almost like the Jews needed something, even though God was going to schlep them out, they weren't doing it with their own merits. They needed something good to prepare themselves. So they had to have the courage of taking the lamb, which was a Egyptian god. You know, they had to do that kind of stuff. The matzah. So they had to do something, and then that allowed God to take them out.
Kind of like the child who's too young to know. You have to bring the spark.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that's something so simple. 3 matzahs, 4 cups of wine. I know it's a little more advanced than most of our classes, but it's something that we do every year, and it gives us a deeper appreciation for it. Any questions from our online community?
Nope. There's a lady that's listening, and she wants to learn about, not Jewish, she wants to learn about how the seder is being conducted because they're going to attend one.
Beautiful. So I would suggest going to passover.net, passover.net, and you will have all the information there about how a seder works. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Online community. We'll be back here with one more class before Passover. We won't have a class in 2 weeks from now. Next week will be our last class for a few weeks. And thank you to Nissan Communication for having this program available to everyone around the world. Have a great week.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisroel Cotlar, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.